So today we begin a new sermon series, a new series in worship entitled Take a Break, focused on Sabbath. We'll be exploring that commandment from God to keep the Sabbath. For an older generation, Sabbath is Sunday, and Sunday comes with expectations and rules. Going to church, stores are closed, maybe even no dancing or no playing cards. Sabbath was supported by blue laws that restricted certain activities and prohibited the sale of certain items. Historians wonder why they were called blue laws. Perhaps from colonial times, when blue was associated with the colonies and red was associated with the royal emblem. Or perhaps they were printed on blue paper originally. Or perhaps because Puritanism and strict morality was known as blue. Younger generations associate Sabbath with practices of self-care, choosing to refrain from using technology, gathering with friends to have a drink or play a game, going to a yoga class, or going on a run. So what does it mean to keep Sabbath in our world without legislative support or social custom? Of the 10 Commandments, I think this is the one we violate most often and with the most pride, because we're very proud of being busy. So let's think together about the commandment from Exodus chapter 20. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the seventh day, the Sabbath day, and consecrated it. The word of the Lord. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. For the people gathered in the wilderness at Mount Sinai who first heard that commandment, a day began at sunset and ended the following sunset. Did you hear that in the poetic story of creation from Genesis 1? There was evening and there was morning. Another day passed by. The poem has a cadence to it. God creates, there is evening, there is morning. God pauses to see that what was created is good. Each day begins with evening. How interesting that the days of creation begin when things wind down, when work stops, when we gather in our homes for an evening meal, when we prepare for sleep, is when the day begins. The day begins with rest before the light of morning ahead. In Judaism, the Sabbath still begins at sunset on Friday evening and concludes on Saturday at sunset. Days are a part of creation, light and dark, evening and morning. Humans have divided days into minutes and hours, months and years, but the days themselves are part of God's good creation. On the first day, God made the light and called the light day, separating it from the darkness, which was night. The rotation of the earth around the sun brings evening and morning, night and day after day after day. Human beings cannot create days We can't add or subtract them, though our language about time is misleading. We talk about wasting time, killing time, using time wisely, time flying, time standing still. All of those are about our experiences of time, about our desire to control time, about our judgments related to how people embody their own time. Time itself, the days, are part of God's good creation. On the sixth day, God made the humans in God's own image, somehow imbuing humanity with a likeness of the divine. God blessed them and gave them their charge to have dominion over the earth, to be fruitful and multiply. They had their marching orders. God saw all that was made, and it was very good. Evening and morning, the sixth day. Then everything was finished, and on the seventh day, God rested from all the work of creation. Nathan Stuckey, the director of the Farminary at Princeton Theological Seminary, a farm they use there, notes that right after giving the humans their job description to care for creation and to be fruitful and multiply, everyone rests. You would think that God would give the instructions and then they would launch into doing the work. Because if you gave a child an assignment, would you expect them then to run onto the playground? If you gave a teenager a list of chores, what would you think if they went and took a nap? Okay, that one might actually happen, but. If you gave a new employee instructions for their work, would you expect them then to say, well, that sounds great, now I'm taking the rest of the day off to chill? On the very first day they existed, humans rested. Before they do anything at all, they rest. In the image of God, they rest. Karl Barth suggests that God rested on the seventh day because God is so pleased with creation. Everything about creation is so wonderful that nothing else is needed. God doesn't need to make anything else. God doesn't need to pursue something better because God is delighted with what is there. God has no regrets. God can rest. And God can find joy in creation, including spending time with those humans created in God's image. The satisfaction of work done well, the delight and joy of a project you're proud of. God finished the work of creation and then settled down with that creation to enjoy it. It is that rest, that joy, that delight that is the foundation for the commandment we heard to keep Sabbath in Exodus 20. For 6 days, God did the work of creation, and then God rested, blessing the seventh day and making it holy. With that foundation, God commands the faithful to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. For thousands of years, faithful people have remembered the Sabbath from sunset on Friday until sunset on Saturday. The early disciples were faithful Jews who still kept their Sabbath on the seventh day, but they honored the first day as the day of the resurrection of their risen Lord. On the first day they would work, but then they would gather together for a meal and for study and prayer. As Christianity emerged from Judaism and from a persecuted minority into the religion of the empire, the first day of the week, Sunday, became the day recognized as Christian Sabbath. Sunday was recognized legally as Sabbath in the year 321, when the Emperor Constantine declared it a day of rest throughout the Roman Empire, the very first blue law. What does it mean to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy? This past Thursday evening, I went to the drugstore and I got my first shingles vaccine. I've had friends who got shingles and I know it was awful. But I've been postponing the vaccine. I just hadn't gotten around to getting it. It wasn't ever a convenient time. So finally, I went on Thursday. My husband, Leif, was out of town. Friday's my day off. I'd heard most people don't get many side effects, especially from the first shot. So I made this long list of things I was going to get done on Friday. And I woke up Friday morning feeling really lousy. I made it from the bed to the recliner, and I shivered with chills under the blanket watching television. Advil helped, but I wasn't 100%. And my list of things to do just sat there. And I was disappointed. Then I was frustrated. Then I was sad. Then I was angry. And late in the day, I realized I would be preaching this sermon to myself. That my own identity is tied up in what I accomplish. That my joy comes from what I achieve. And that I do not rest well. I share that with you not to have you tell me your stories about shingles vaccines later. I don't need to know. And I share it not to have you ask how I'm doing. I'm fine. I share it to say I am preaching to myself, because Sabbath is not a part of my faithfulness. Sabbath has not integrated into my soul yet. If you thought in this sermon there would be a bunch of tips about how to remember Sabbath, you were wrong. Because as soon as I offer you tips, I put them into a list of things and begin to check them off, and then we're right back in the mess that I started with. How about you? I'm not far enough on the journey to tell you how to do it well, because it's such a shift in mindset. There would be a very sinful irony to giving you a list of things to do to remember Sabbath. To transform our understanding, instead, Sabbath offers us lessons and invitations to shift our hearts. Sabbath teaches us that we are not the masters of time. We cannot create it or subtract from it. Sabbath invites us to recognize that we are creatures and not creator. For even the days are gifts of God's creation. Sabbath teaches that we do not cause the sun to set, and we do not push the earth on its axis to rotate it again to morning light. Sabbath invites us into a relationship of trust with God, who made the light and called it day, and called the darkness night. Sabbath teaches us that rest is a gift, not a reward earned for a day of hard work, because the days begin with the evening of rest. Sabbath invites us to embrace rest without striving, without pursuing, without proving anything. Sabbath teaches us that we do not create the beauty of the world, the flowers and the trees, the mountains and the oceans. And Sabbath invites us to rest with God, delighting in that beauty. Sabbath teaches us that our worth is not determined by how much we accumulate. Sabbath invites us to know that we are beloved children of God for who we are and not what we have. Sabbath teaches us that nothing we do defines who we are. Nothing we do determines God's delight in us. God is pleased with us because we are created in God's image and we belong to God. Sabbath invites us to explore the anxiety that sits in our hearts when we stop doing all that. Sabbath teaches us that the world tempts us with false identities that are grounded in worldly value and idolatrous claim. Sabbath invites us to claim our identity as children of God, those created in the image of God, those in whom God delights. The word Sabbath has at its root the verb to stop or to cease. Stop. In a world that values perpetual motion, stop. Put down the work, put down the chores, put down the list, put down the expectations so that you can remember that before all of that, you are a beloved child of God. Stop striving, stop proving, stop pursuing that false identity. I have no advice. I'm not there yet. May we learn together to stop, to learn the lessons of Sabbath, to accept the invitations of Sabbath, to take delight in creation, to stop and to rest. God saw everything that had been created, and it was very good. Thus creation was finished, and God rested. May we hear the divine voice reminding us that we are very good and inviting us to rest. Amen.